big note of the nice moves that Caitlin has going on, by the way. So thank you for that in the countdown, which is playing again for me. StreamYard has been very funny lately. This is the fun of video broadcast, kids. It's something should go a little bit wrong. In any case, my name is Jesse. A big welcome back to all our incredible audience today. A lot of you have been joining us all year long, which is fantastic. So if you have joined us before, welcome back. So nice to have you again as we get to showcase and celebrate some of the coolest people and places on planet Earth. As many of you know, this is our space month. So we've been doing a huge variety of incredible programs. We've got our second astronaut coming next week. We've had Abigail Freeman, Ashwin Vasavada. We've had Ravi Prakash. We've had these incredible NASA JPL engineers over the last few weeks. It has been a wild ride, specifically talking a lot about Mars, which is a fond planet to me, shall we say. If you haven't caught any of those or want to check them out, our YouTube channel has absolutely everything we've ever done. You can share this program too with your family, friends, and more. Lots of opportunity to keep the excitement and learning going. Now, before I dive in with our specific speaker today, I want to note we do have a Kahoot together. So if you're live with us or on YouTube or walking down the street and hear me talking because I'm really loud, head to this Kahoot game pin. There's lots of opportunity for quick questions between our talk and our Q&A. We'd love to have you play along. You'll win Caitlin and I's everlasting respect by winning. So that's worth a lot. It's going to be a really good time. Now, I'm so pleased to welcome back Dr. Caitlin Crawford. She is a flight systems engineer for NASA's fabled Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It is like the coolest research facility in the world. They get to work to put robots and more on other worlds and to explore the cosmos around us. If there's a cooler job than that, I don't know what it is. So Dr. Caitlin's going to blow our minds with a little bit about the amazing work she's gotten to work on a variety of amazing projects in NASA's fabled history. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to her. None of you are here to hear me talk. I'm talking too much already. So Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us and welcome back.
Hello, and thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to be talking about all the work that I get to do at NASA JPL.
You sure have a lot. So I know if you want to dive right in, you're welcome to lead us away. And I'm so excited for Q&A with all our students when you're done.
Sounds great. Okay, well, let me go ahead and share my screen. So give me one hot second.
Dun, 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 dun.
The elevator music.
Jeopardy theme song, which I can't do in full. Otherwise, I'm in big trouble, I think. But here we are. Farmington Middle School just joined us too in the background. Way to go. Welcome in, guys. And we are... almost wants to share fully. You're good to go. Caitlin, it's beautiful.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. So my name is Dr. Caitlin Crawford. And like Jesse said, I'm a flight systems engineer at the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab out in Pasadena, California. This is our beautiful campus with these beautiful stunning mountains in the background. So today, let's see if I can get this to... We're going to talk a little bit about me and how the work that I do at the Jet Propulsion Lab, go into a little bit about the spacecraft power, and then also talk a little bit about my journey in STEM and how I got to where I am today. So maybe that will help inspire you guys to be the next generation of NASA JPL scientists. And I get to work with you and for you in the future. So this is me. I'm very short, but not quite an astronaut, but maybe one day we can try. So I grew up in a really small town in Virginia on the eastern coast of the United States. I received my doctorate in material science from the Colorado School of Mines out in Golden, Colorado, so the middle. And I researched materials for deep space power when I was a graduate student there. And then now, like I said, I'm ultimately a flight systems engineer, which is a bit of a mouthful, at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So what exactly did I do in STEM when I was working as a graduate student? So as a material scientist, we have to think about all of these different facets of science and engineering. So we think about physics, we think about engineering and chemistry and math, and admittedly, there's a little bit of art in there too. And we take a bunch of these things and we use them as tools in our arsenal, and that allows us to think about materials and the science of how materials form. So if we think of solid structures and solid materials, maybe like the desks that you're sitting on or your cell phone in your hand, they're made up of networks of repeating systems. And we can think of those things as almost like atomic Legos. And we, as material scientists, get to figure out how to make the best Lego. So we can think of these cute little building blocks here as our fundamental Legos that make up the metal of your desk or the metal of your cell phone. And this, let's imagine this red dot is an atom of one type, and then there's these blue dots, which are an atom of a different type. So we think about chemistry and what atom can we put where, and then after these Legos repeat, then we get really cool, interesting material properties. So I don't have a cell phone on me, unfortunately, but imagine your cell phone, for example. The front of your phone is glass. And that has a really interesting network of atoms that you can see here on the screen. But the back of a phone is typically metallic or metal. And so we have these sort of metallic Legos, if you will, that's really happening on the atomic scale. These two different things are different materials. We have glass and we have metal. Now, when engineers like myself, material scientists, design these devices, we often have to think about, like, what properties do we want for various elements of the technology we are trying to create? So in the case of a cell phone, the front of the cell phone needs to be, we need to be able to see through it. And that's what we call optically transparent. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's just something that we have to see through. But we also have to trade off. If something is see-through, it tends to be a little bit more brittle, so it can break easier. So I don't know about you guys, but if you take a cell phone and you drop it, sometimes that glass can crack. And it's a bit of a trade-off that we as material scientists often have to think about, which is this balancing act of what do we need and what can we live with. So it would be really great if I dropped my cell phone and it never broke. But the problem is then it probably wouldn't be see-through. It wouldn't be optically transparent, which is what we need. So we play this sort of design game with any material that comes into contact with anything. So most of everything that you see and you touch is made up of some type of material, whether that be glass or metal or a plastic or something. And that requires a material scientist to understand the choice of why we picked that one particular material. So I love playing Nintendo Switch. So we can sort of think of the same argument. The Joy-Cons, when we're playing video games, they have to be light, but they also have to be durable. And because they're light, plastic would be a good choice for those. You could imagine if your Joy-Cons were glass and then you threw them while you were dancing, all of a sudden they would break. It would be a really bad time. So it's our decision as material scientists to try to figure out what materials go into each of these individual elements. And one of those things is actually spacecraft. So I was a material scientist for space technologies. On the left-hand side is an actual picture of the Mars Perseverance rover while it was getting built up in the high bay of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I was able to stand in our observation deck while the engineers who were on the floor were building the spacecraft before it went to Mars. And I took this photo here. Now, if you look in the back, there's this really weird fin-like structure here. And that thing is called an RTG, which the big broken up word is radioisotope thermoelectric generator, which if you said that 10 times fast, it'd be very hard. But it's a big fancy name for the power source that certain space missions need, including the Mars rovers. So the RTG supplies power to the whole spacecraft and allows us to be able to do the science on the surface of Mars and supply power to this vessel. Because when we are on the surface of Mars or some other planet or wherever we may be in the solar system, we can't take an electrical cord and plug it into the wall. We need some way to power the spacecraft sort of autonomously. And that's what an RTG can do. So we can think about when Perseverance is actually on the surface of Mars. So this was a photo that Perseverance took. We need to be able to sort of back up as an engineer and think about the process and the design choices from really small fundamental levels. So we have the application. We want to be able to take these photos, right? We want to be able to send this rover to Mars. But first, that rover has to get built up and created by our amazing engineers here at the Jet Propulsion Lab. But we also have to think about, while we're designing this whole system, what do each of the individual components for the system do for the spacecraft? And in the case of the RTG, or radioisotope thermoelectric generator, that system powers the whole spacecraft. And it just so happens that that RTG is also made out of a bunch of individual components. So we're sort of zooming in to see how to build this thing up from the ittiest bittiest, essentially Lego, and then zooming out to get us to the surface of Mars. So RTGs are made of something called thermocouples, which are made from thermoelectric materials. And they are this really cool class of materials that are able to convert thermal energy into electric energy. And so if you think about it, when you are in your kitchen and the stove gets turned on, you can't touch the stove because it's so hot. You would burn yourself. But that is a form of thermal energy. Now, when you take something and plug it into the wall to power, let's say, the lights in the room, that's a form of electrical energy. They're both flavors of energy, but sometimes one can be easier to create or harness than the other. And so for us, when we're thinking about powering spacecraft, we need electricity. We need energy in the form of electricity. But electricity can be hard to generate because, again, we don't have that power outlet. And so what we're able to do as material scientists are able to sort of think of clever tricks to be able to convert one type of energy into the other. And so thermoelectric materials are able to do this conversion from the thermal energy, so think of that hot stove, into electric energy. So our goal was to make these elements better, because if we made them more efficient or better at working, then ultimately that would propagate through this whole chain of events, and eventually maybe we would get longer, more powerful, lasting science. Because if we can increase the amount of power we create, well, maybe that Mars rover will be on the surface a little bit longer and doing more science for a little bit longer. So RTGs and NASA. So the Martian rovers are not the only missions to utilize this form of technology for NASA. We have used RTGs for the Apollo missions. So this is the Apollo lander. You can see an RTG right there with one of the astronauts actually on the surface of the moon. But we've gone to all really cool places in the solar system with RTGs. We have the New Horizon mission that went to Pluto. Again, the Apollo mission. And then my favorite missions are Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, which have since left the solar system. And they are still going. We are still receiving data back from Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 outside of our solar system, which is crazy because the power source of this system is still working. So that's really cool. But there are other options. When we think about powering spacecraft, this RTG technology that converts thermal energy into electricity isn't the only way that we can create power. So, depending on the objective of the certain mission, there are various other sources of power. So, there are a lot of missions on Mars too that use solar panels. And solar panels, again, we need to do this conversion of our energy. Instead of the thermal energy to electrical energy, now we're saying let's use the solar energy. So the energy from the sun. Let's harness the energy from the sun and convert the solar energy into electrical energy. So that's what InSight did, and that's what some of the earlier rovers did as well. And ultimately, I now work on, as a flight systems engineer, I work a little less on the material side of things, I must admit it to you, but I get to work on a really cool program called NISAR. And NISAR is an Earth observation satellite that is launching early next year, and we launch out of India. So it's a bit of crunch time. We're in the final stages of getting it all together. This is the actual spacecraft, a photo of the spacecraft taken from the observation deck at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where they're getting it built up. The spacecraft has since left the Jet Propulsion facility and is now at the Indian Space Research Organization's facility, where we will be launching next year. So there's there's a cool animation of what the launch will look like. Since we have not launched, this is just an animation, but hopefully if everything goes smoothly, this is sort of the bread and butter of my job, is as a systems engineer to try to figure out this whole process and to make sure that the video that we are about to see is actually what happens and then performs smoothly. Okay, so that's NISAR. And the cool thing that NISAR is going to do is, because we're an Earth observation satellite, we're basically going to detect changes in the Earth's topological movement down to a couple of centimeters, actually. So we can see how the climate is changing, how maybe erosion is happening, to just see how our Earth is changing on this sort of global scale, and detect and hopefully help give imagery when natural disasters may strike. It's really quite a beautiful mission. So we are utilizing solar panels. So again, that's solar technology, harnessing the energy from the sun. So that's these big panels here that just collect the energy from the sun. Our science instruments are here. And this big thing that you saw sort of bloom out, that's called a reflector. And that is what allows us to detect signals from the surface of the Earth. So what's cool is that I also work on another project now, and that's the Europa Clipper project. So this also uses solar panels to power its spacecraft and the scientific instruments on board that mission. The solar panels in this mission are massive because we are going to the Jupiter's moon Europa. So if we're here on Earth and we think about all these amazing rovers that are going to Mars, that's here. I also love Mars a lot. Then we're going to even further past the asteroid belt to Jupiter and one of their moons. So we have to have these really massive solar panels so we can collect enough energy from the sun to be able to orbit that moon. And so we're trying to detect possible environmental signs that Europa may be good to harness life, because it's this really icy moon that we think that there might be all of these awesome oceans underneath this icy surface that may be able to harbor life. And that launches in October of next year. So I'm really excited to be a part of that team as well. So as we wrap up on the things that I work on, I just wanted to say, what was my path of where I am today, and how did I get to work on all of these really cool space missions? So again, I said I was born and raised in a small town in Virginia. That's Winchester. We're famous for apples and a lot of orchards and the Appalachian Trail. I went to the University of Virginia for my bachelor's. My intended major was actually in fine art, with a minor in chemistry, which you may think is a little wacky for aerospace engineering, but I argue art is needed for engineering. And then I ultimately transferred and majored in aerospace engineering in the School of Engineering at UVA, where I graduated in 2015 with my bachelor's. And then I left to get my doctorate in Colorado at the Colorado School of Mines in material science engineering. While I was a graduate student, I was fortunate enough to win a fellowship to do work with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So I was sort of back and forth between JPL and Colorado during grad school. But then once I got my doctorate, I was hired on as a flight systems engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is where I am today. So I've been here for about a year and a half now. So I just want to say, I think it's a really important thing to say. There will be periods of time in your life where you may fail, and that's totally okay. I went through a lot of failure. It's not a smooth road to potentially get to where you want to be, and that's okay. But also something that I think is really important is that you don't have to be stuck behind a microscope to be a scientist. I really love traveling and I love interacting with people and talking with people, but I still love my science, and so you don't have to lock yourself in a lab to be one of those things. And I couldn't be where I am today without some incredible people that have helped me along the way. So certain people are really priceless, like your teachers and your support system. So I was very fortunate to have some really incredible teachers and mentors to help me get to where I am today. So those types of people are really priceless. And I think it's important to have a life outside of STEM. I love drawing and I still love photography and art. I love traveling and backpacking into the wilderness and talking with all of you. So with that, that's it. That's me.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. And on the fine art note, I want to note, we're really big on highlighting the fact that a lot of engineers, scientists that have a background in art tend to be more creative in their role. It's why we have things like our art contests, which our students might know, but our James Webb Space Telescope art campaign is on right now. So if kids want to join in with that and do some really cool stuff, end up like Caitlin, I can't encourage that enough. I also, two things I noticed that would be sort of minor things to pick up on for some of our students. The rotisserie maneuver of NISAR is amazing, just as a name that they came up with it as that. Thank you very much. And I really thought it was like a formatting error with your face in the astronaut thing. And then you're just like, I'm really short. And that is amazing. So thank you for making my day with that.
I am 5 foot flat. So
my wife is 5'11". Every time people meet her, they think she's going to be 5'2", and then she towers over them like a monster. Yeah. Folks, we're going to dive in with Kahoot. Caitlin has left us like a gazillion hours for questions and all sorts of other stuff, but we're going to start with our little 4-question quiz based on everything you just learned, test your understanding, have a little fun, and then we are going to go live with Q&A. I'm going to go to Mr. Shattuck's class first. We do go to Q&A. YouTubers, we'd love to hear from you as well, but the game pin's up on the screen, and Caitlin, you can give us little hints when there's 5 seconds to go for each of these questions if you'd like. But again, what they win is both of our everlasting respect. So I'm really excited.
A little embarrassing if I don't know the answer.
I think you have a good chance. I'm thinking 4 out of 4 for you, but our kids will see how it goes. We're going to dive in. You can still start after we get started. The faster you answer, the more points you get for any student that might be new to this. All right. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, and. RTGs utilize what kind of energy to power robots in space? So, is it solar, nuclear, wind, or gas? We're just filling it up. We're going up and pouring some propane in the tank up there on Mars. 12 seconds. Most of you are getting your answers in. This is, by the way, the RTG scene in The Martian is still one of the great scenes in a movie of all time to make people want to be engineers. It's incredible for our students that might not have seen it. We got, solar. We messed them up. Now we know RTGs. We're going to have to double down on that. Now, Legend Hen takes our lead. One of our only 2 to get that one right. So nuclear, it is a nuclear generator. It's fascinating. It's a very cool thing. Okay. We're going to go to number 2. True or false? All space missions look outward to things far away in the universe. When we send something up to space, it's looking out. Other planets, other stars, all the time. Never not. Now, 10 seconds left. I'm going to guess maybe the mission that we talked about a lot might not be an outward-facing mission. Some of the coolest space missions actually don't fit the bill of NISAR, which is very exciting. 50-50 split. This is we went really challenging. Caitlin, we messed him up today. So a lot of space missions look back on Earth. It's how we understand as much as we do about the planet. And it's fascinating to think about what the future of missions like NISAR will hold and more, which might lead us into question 3. I'm just going to give a hint that is coming up. But Hero Boa takes a big lead over Magic Wolf. Okay. So this is multi-select, so it's going to be more than one answer. NISAR will be able to help us understand more about, it's at least one, might be all 4. The Earth's water, polar regions, volcanoes, climate change. Can't be all of those things, can it? No one's answered so far. We've really messed them up. This
we
is
can
the
really think
food I've ever made.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, no.
We're looking at all sorts of things.
We are. In fact, we're looking at all these things. The website is spectacular and highlights a lot of the things going on. Climate change, all of you got, which is spectacular. But it is all 4, literally everything. Volcanoes are the one that tripped with the most people. We can understand more about the Earth, how it shifts, how it moves, which is like black magic for any space mission to have that power. It's very, very cool. All right. This is my last one based on your very last slide. Caitlin succeeded on the first try at everything she's ever done. Just a total pro, unstoppable. In fact, this is the answer for Caitlin is true of everyone we've ever had on the broadcast, and for all of you as well. Most people we have on fail relentlessly. That's actually the uniting factor of all our scientists and explorers, is that we just suck at like almost everything, but we keep doing it, and then occasionally something good happens. So false, yes. 3 of you are so optimistic about Caitlin.
I really appreciate that.
That is so nice. All right, here's our leaderboard, and then we're heading to Deep River for our first question. Oh, it was a lot of fun. Expert Pigeon is 3rd, which is incidentally a rabbit in a crown for some reason. Bright Hamster is 2nd. And first, for all the marbles, dun, 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 dun. Flying Quail. Okay, way to go. Now, Caitlin, these aren't their real names, just so you know. I'm just a spoiler there. We are going to head to Mr. Shadid's class 5-6s if you guys want to kick it off. And if anyone was any of those students, let us know as we go into Q&A. But come on in Deep River, folks. Hey.
Have you ever found any aliens?
I am hopeful that one day we will, but sadly we have not yet. I love that NASA is trying to find signs of life or aliens in other places of the solar system, but we're not quite there yet, sadly.
We are not. However, I will say we have a lot of NASA engineers, astronauts, space enthusiasts, and communicators. It is the universal answer that people think there is life elsewhere in the universe. It's very hard to find, and space is really big. This is the thing that I think trips up a lot of people. It's not like they're our next door neighbors. We can knock and see if they're there. Space is huge. But to think that we're the only life to have ever arisen in the universe is pretty unlikely given the scale of the universe. So I really like when we get the alien question. Thanks, guys. All right. Miss Fletcher's class, our future Mars explorers. Come on in, unmute your mic, and take us away. Hey, guys.
Hello. Okay, introduce yourself. My name is Ryan. We were doing a biosphere project if we lived on Mars and what we would need, and I was wondering how would we get how would you guys get Moxie to work on Mars?
Wow, Ryan, that's an excellent question. So Moxie is a scientific instrument that helps with what we call in situ research utilization. So I must admit, Ryan, I think you probably know more about Moxie than I do. I'm not quite sure how we would get Moxie to work on Mars. I know that it is on the current rover, but I think I'd have to ask one of my colleagues about it.
We did a Stump the Scientist. Way to go, Miss Fletcher. By the way, sorry, because I didn't know the context of Moxie, and I'm reading a book with a lot of 1920s slang, so I'm like, how are we going to get the Moxie to get on Mars? That's where my mind goes instantly. Take that as you will. Follow up with that. Miss Fletcher's class, email me, and I can try and find some answers about Moxie and find out more if anyone's ever covered that or talked about that anyway, but I really like that question.
Also, there's a gentleman here who actually helped with Moxie. Like he was either the lead or maybe the deputy lead on Moxie. So I can send his contact information to Jesse. And so Ryan, we can get an answer to your question.
I like that very much. Thanks, guys. So Miss Fletcher, do follow up. Message me. Miss Kearney's class, we're heading to you, and then we're going to go to Farmington Middle School right after that. 5th graders, come on in.
I'm Addison from Ryo, Wisconsin. I have a question. Did you help design the guppy?
The guppy. What is the guppy?
The guppy is like the rocket ship parts. It gets like the rocket ship parts to NASA.
Oh, no, I did not do that. We have a whole special team. We call them like an ATLO team. It's like Assembly Test Launch Operations Team. That's what ATLO is. And so that is their bread and butter to help sort of deliver spacecraft to the launch operations and the launch pads. So that's not my role, but we have some really great scientists who work on the Cape that do that all the time.
Rio Elementary is just doing all this free research. Both their classes, plus you're coming in with all this specialized knowledge. You guys are the next Mars engineers, I think.
These are great questions.
They are very challenging. Farmington Middle School, Miss Dillon's class. Thanks for coming in last minute. This is so exciting. Hey.
Hi, I'm Lane. And what kind of life do you speculate could be on Europa?
Oh,
and we have a second part to that.
Yeah.
Do you think your satellite could bring like samples of life back to Earth?
Ooh, okay, interesting question. So, for Europa Clipper, Lane, this is both of you guys great questions. So, this is going to be a probe that orbits the moon Europa, and it's actually going to fly by Jupiter and then do some data takes of Europa and then fly back by Jupiter, because we have to actually avoid a highly Europa has a high radiation environment, so it can be hard for a spacecraft to just constantly orbit in a high radiation environment, because it can kill our spacecraft, which is very sad. So as we're doing these active flybys of Europa and we're constantly taking data, the idea is, the scientists believe for Europa, is that Europa itself is similar to the size of our moon, and that we think that it is encrusted with an icy outer shell, and that the inside of the moon is this beautiful oceanic planet. So these moving tidal oceans. If we think about our own ocean and all the life that exists in our own ocean, we have fish, we have sharks, we have big things, we have really small things though. We have plankton and microbes. So when we think about our ocean, we have a bunch of these hot hydrothermal vents and the sort of crevices of our ocean. And these hot hydrothermal vents are actually a form of energy, and life tends to congregate around these hydrothermal vents on our own planet. So the hope is that maybe there are some hydrothermal vents on Europa as well that are fostering life in that environment. Unfortunately, because Europa is an orbiter, as we sort of do these flybys, we're not going through and like landing on the surface. We're just sort of like taking pictures as we go around. As a result, we can't really capture life. So if there were, let's say, a fish that was just like hanging around or something walking on the surface, we're not going to be able to bring it back for this mission. But if we do with this mission detect evidence of chemical structures that help foster life, because there are some elements that we have here on Earth that are sort of the building blocks of life. So it's called schnapps. It's like sulfur, nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, phosphorus. I might be missing one. But if Europa itself has all of these chemical building blocks, and we can detect that with Europa Clipper, then maybe we'll send another mission in the future to try to see if we can harness or potentially detect an actual sign of life. And then there was another question too that I don't think that we addressed.
It was like, how do we get them?
Okay.
It was, can we bring stuff back? No, you nailed it all. Jeez, that was incredible. I will say for our students a couple things on this note. Number one, Europa Clipper. Every nerd in the world, in the space world, has been like looking forward to Europa Clipper for years. Like, it's so cool. It's such a cool spot in the solar system. So I really encourage you to check that out. In terms of sample return missions, there is a Mars sample return mission. This is the first time we're ever going to bring something back from Mars. This is in the works, which is really exciting. And the closest analog to bringing something back from something was just came back to Earth not too long ago, OSIRIS-REx. So we went and landed on an asteroid, in an asteroid. It's really freaky, the sort of composition of it. Picked stuff up and brought it back to Earth. And that is like, again, space missions are really commonplace to you kids, which is really exciting, but this is like the best time ever in the history of space exploration. We are doing the coolest stuff ever right now. So I love that question and interest. Thank you so much, Farmington Middle School. Caitlin, we're gonna do a second round. This is so much fun. Mr. Shattered class, I'm coming to you guys. Come on in and take us away. Hey.
In your opinion, what's the coolest thing you found, like you get to experience on a daily basis that most other people can't connect to working at NASA?
Ooh, I love that question. So I am a people person and I love talking with people. I love interacting with people. The really, really cool thing about my job is I get to work on really cool things, but so do all of my colleagues. And I'm a space nerd and I love space, but so are all of my colleagues. And so JPL itself, there's a little under 7,000 people who work here. It's quite a big place, but it sort of feels like a college campus. We're all walking around and you can just go up to somebody and be like, hey, I see that you have a lanyard on for this one particular mission. How's it going? Tell me about it. And so we're just this like boiling hub of melting pot of scientists that just love talking about space. So on a day-to-day basis, I get to just talk about space all day.
With the coolest people in the world, which is like one of the joys of science, that you work for a long time, especially to become a doctor like you. But at the end of that, you get to work on what you love with people you love and go to amazing places and work on things that have real impact in the world. I'm going to harp on something because I think my experience, most people are introverts and most scientists and explorers are introverts. Actually, the overwhelming majority of people we bring on this broadcast are not necessarily overwhelming people like you, which is, shines through in the first 8 seconds of having you on the broadcast. So it's nice to have a fellow extreme extrovert here. We're going to head to Miss Fletcher's class. Thanks for that question, Mr. Shaddis Group. Come on back in, future Mars explorers.
Hi, my name is Bryn, and I would like to ask you, what is your favorite part about working at NASA?
Bryn, that is a great question. So it's tough because there's so many good things to choose from. I would say that I love that every day my job is so different. I am constantly trying to triage a problem that the spacecraft is having. I like to think that the best way I can do an analogy for my current job as a flight systems engineer is if we think about spacecraft like people and bodies. There are all these awesome scientific instruments like the MOXIE instrument that we heard about on one of the Mars rovers. And I like to think of those as like your hands and your limbs and the cool things that, you get to pick up a rock or whatever. My particular role is more about, in this analogy, the brain or the heart. It's about what makes the spacecraft tick and turn on. And I have to be able to sort of be a doctor and come to the spacecraft with like a little stethoscope and be like, what's wrong with the spacecraft today? Is it not feeling well? Is it a little sick? And so it's really cool because every day is like a new puzzle. It's also really cool because when one mission ends, another mission begins, right? Like I've been on NISAR for about a year and a half, and I'm transitioning to the Clipper team, and it's super duper exciting. But that just means I get to learn about a whole nother spacecraft and get to do whole new problems and figure it out from there. So every day is a joy.
What a beautiful answer. Thank you, Caitlin. I'm going to head to Farmington first. I know you guys are sort of in a weird quasi thing today with subs and all sorts of stuff in the library. So I'm going to go to your question. And then Miss Kearney, we're going to wrap up with you right after that. So Miss Dillon, hey.
Okay, so are there any other planets or moons that may contain life? Or that speculate might contain life?
And what is the coolest material that NASA has developed that you think, and why?
Ooh, okay. We've got two questions. Coolest material and other places of life. So yes, let's start with the first one. The Europa is just one of the potential places, right? When we originally sent things to Mars, we were, and we still are thinking like, this is our sister planet, essentially. It's the closest to us. It has similar-esque environments. There are some differences, like the gravity and the lack of atmosphere. But the solar system or the universe is so large that we think that with of all these different galaxies and all these different solar systems, that it's finding like a needle in a haystack. We're just sort of looking inwardly at our solar system currently, but there are all these exoplanets and all these different types of moons that may be habitable and that we just haven't found them yet. So I think, yes, it's more work to go. I think statistically it's highly likely, but you can't say for sure until we find it. And then for the second question about materials, we've made a lot of really cool materials. And I'm partial to thermoelectrics because that's what I worked on. But I have to say, one of the really cool materials, there are two, would either be aerogels, which, to be honest, I don't know the chemical construction of an aerogel, but it's this beautiful sort of solid structure that has thermally insulated properties that is so light. And if you look at the link that Jesse sent, it looks like air almost captured, but it's this crazy material that is quite beautiful. And if you hold it, you're like, this is essentially air. So that one's really cool. And then I really also love carbon fiber and carbon nanotubes. We can do some really interesting things with material properties with carbon and the way that we configure carbon in a particular type of matrix. So that's those two. I love that you guys guessed that I would say aerogels.
My first thought, like if you weren't going to say it, I was going to highlight it. Everyone should look up aerogels. So again, spelled like this. One of the cool pictures online is it's a rose. So they've taken a flower and put like this really thin layer of aerogel, and they've got a blowtorch underneath it, and the flower is totally fine. Like it's the best thing at dissipating heat we've ever created ever, and it's like as thin and looks like air. It's so freaky and cool.
It's wild.
I will note too, in our past, because we get a lot of questions on like what could potentially harbor life. The biggest ones that I've seen listed are Europa, Titan, Mars, and Enceladus. So Enceladus has some of those cool like oceanic properties. Mars we've been looking for a long time. Titan we know has lakes and oceans, but they're made out of methane. So they're like gas bodies of water. It's really freaky. It's got a really cool atmosphere. I've actually done a broadcast on how we're seeking for life elsewhere in the universe, like the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, how we go about that process. So that's on our YouTube channel as well. Caitlin, time flies when you're having fun. I'm going to stress this again. If people want to check out your amazing work at NISAR, it's there. Our art contest, which I will share with all our classes, is at the James Webb website. So I'll get all that to all our registered groups. But we're going to wrap up with one final question for Ms. Kearney's class. If you guys want to come on in, Rio Elementary, take us away. Hey.
Hello. I have a question about, so the last Mars rover expedition thing, I heard that you guys like found water on Mars and it had like bacteria in it. And I'm wondering if maybe those could evolve into like future aliens, because like humans evolved from just ordinary like microbes and bacteria like millions and millions of years ago. So maybe those could become future aliens, maybe. That's what I'm wondering.
It's a great question. So the last Mars rover that is currently operating on the surface, that's going to be Perseverance, and it did find signs of past ice. There's not ice there. I want to reiterate that we did not find water, but we found evidence that water existed. Unfortunately, there is no bacteria in that. I think we would be super duper excited. But if we did find some crazy bacteria or microbes somewhere in the solar system, then evolutionarily, maybe they would turn into something after, many, 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 many years. But I think we've got a long way to go before that happens.
Long way to go. Worth noting, because it is a common thing. A lot of people think that we found bacteria. If we ever found bacteria, NASA would lose its mind. It would be the greatest discovery in the history of science ever. Like every scientist's head would explode. You'd know, because they'd be just running, screaming down the street how excited they were at all times. Abigail Freeman, who we just had on like 2 days ago, she's amazing on our YouTube channel, talked all about the water past history we found on Mars. If you want to check out her as a past broadcast, amazing scientist, one of my very favorite people we bring on. Caitlin, this has been so much fun. Honestly, we could talk all day. Before I bring in our classes to say a big thank you and farewell, is there any final message you want to share with our kids about your work or anything to keep them extra inspired before we leave off today?
Okay. Well, I did send Jesse over a link for Europa Clipper. If you guys haven't seen it, we're doing something where you can basically send your name and it'll be added to the spacecraft, so it will go to Europa. And that's our message in the bottle project. So if you can, I would check it out. And then that way you can add your name to be sent to Europa, which I think is so cool. And I hope that you guys will be really inspired to come work in the space industry one day. And I hope to be working with you one day here at the Jet Propulsion Lab.
Woohoo! Hard to think of a better message than that. I'll make sure you all get our Europa Clipper link, Europa message in a bottle link in just a minute. So stay tuned for email. And Caitlin, what we do to wrap up every program, I'm going to bring in Mr. Shadid's class, Miss Fletcher's class, Miss Kearney's class, from Birmingham Middle School, our group. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.